They were voices that felt timeless, warm, polished, and effortless. But what if the harmony you heard was hiding lives that were quietly falling apart? Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes ruled the 1970s with unforgettable Philadelphia soul classics, yet fame didn't protect them from loss, money troubles, or devastating personal battles. As the years passed, success slowly gave way to conflict, illness, and tragic endings that few fans ever saw coming. So what really happened to the voices behind the music, and where are they now in 2026? This is a story of glory, pain, and the high cost of being legendary. The story of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, dreams, struggle, and the making of a soul legacy. Long before the spotlight found them, the story of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes was built on persistence, disappointment, and an almost stubborn belief that success would come one day. At the center of it all was Harold Melvin, often called one of the oldest working men in show business, a quiet leader whose determination kept the group alive through years when quitting would have been easier. Born under the Cancer zodiac sign, Melvin was known for his emotional depth and resilience, traits that would define the group's long, uneven journey. The story began in Philadelphia in the mid-1950s, when the group was first known as the Charlemagnes. The original lineup included Franklin Pierce, Bernard Williams, Roosevelt Brody, Jesse Gillis Jr., and Harold Melvin. They were young, ambitious, and convinced they could make it in music. But the industry was unforgiving. They recorded for multiple labels, chasing contracts and radio play, only to be met with rejection after rejection. Years passed with little to show for their effort except mounting frustration. Their first small breakthrough came in 1960 with the song My Hero. It wasn't a major hit, but it charted just enough to keep their hopes alive. 5 years later, Get Out and Let Me Cry reached the R&B charts in 1965. Again, it wasn't a blockbuster, but it proved they weren't invisible. These modest victories mattered, because without them, the group might not have survived long enough to reach its defining era. Like many struggling bands, the lineup refused to stay still. Bernard Williams left to form the original Blue Notes, forcing Harold Melvin to rebuild once again. New members came and went, including lead singer John Atkins. Then, in 1970, everything changed. A drummer named Teddy Pendergrass joined the group. Teddy had previously performed with another R&B group, the Cadillacs, but his arrival marked a turning point. When Atkins left later that year, Teddy stepped up as lead vocalist, and the Blue Notes finally found their voice. Pendergrass's powerful, emotionally charged delivery transformed the group's sound. What followed was the break they had waited nearly 2 decades for. A contract with Philadelphia International Records, led by legendary producers Kenneth Gamble and Leon Huff. Under this label, the lineup, Harold Melvin, Teddy Pendergrass, Bernard Wilson, Lawrence Brown, and Lloyd Parks, later joined by Jerry Cummings, finally reached national prominence. In 1972, they released If You Don't Know Me By Now. The song became their signature hit, reaching #1 on the R&B chart and #3 on the pop chart, selling over 1 million copies and earning a gold record. Success followed quickly. Songs like I Miss You, The Love I Lost, and Wake Up. Everybody resonated deeply with listeners because they spoke honestly about love, struggle, and social reality. In 1975, Bad Luck dominated the dance charts for 11 consecutive weeks, setting a record. That same year, Hope That We Can Be Together Soon, featuring Sharon Page, reached #1 on the R&B charts. By the mid-1970s, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes were one of the defining voices of Philadelphia soul. Their harmonies filled radios, dance floors, and living rooms across America, and decades later, their music still carries emotional weight. Yet behind the success were years of sacrifice, lineup changes, and personal battles that shaped every note they sang. Their rise wasn't fast, easy, or clean, but that's exactly why their legacy still matters today. The changing faces of members. As their music climbed the charts, the faces behind Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes never stayed the same for long. The 1970s brought enormous success, but also constant change. Behind the smooth harmonies and polished records was a group in motion, reshaped again and again by ambition, opportunity, and growing tension. One of their most talked-about songs, Don't Leave Me This Way, first appeared on the 1975 album Wake Up Everybody. In the United States, the track was quietly overlooked and not released as a single at the time. But overseas, the reaction was very different. In the UK, listeners embraced the song, and by 1977, it had climbed to number 5 on the British charts. The delayed recognition only added to its mystique. 2 years later, in 1979, the group finally released it as a US single, pairing it with Bad Luck. By then, the song already carried the weight of a missed moment and a second chance. Throughout the decade, the group released a string of successful albums, all produced by the legendary duo Kenneth Gamble and Leon Huff. Albums such as To Be True and Wake Up Everybody each sold more than 500,000 copies, earning gold certification and cementing the group's place in soul music history. Their popularity reached another milestone with Collector's Item, a compilation of their greatest songs that went on to sell over 1 million copies. For fans, it was proof that the Blue Notes had become more than a hit-making group. They were a defining sound of the era. Yet success did not bring stability. Members continued to rotate in and out, sometimes quietly, sometimes under strain. In 1972, Harold Melvin made 2 significant changes to the lineup. Lloyd Parks was replaced by Jerry Cummings, and a new voice was added, Sharon Page. Sharon brought versatility and strength to the group, contributing both as a featured vocalist and as a solo performer. Her presence expanded the group's sound and helped push their popularity even further. From the outside, everything appeared to be working perfectly. The records sold, the tours continued, and the name Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes carried real weight in the music world. But with fame came pressure, creative differences, personal ambitions, and unresolved conflicts that simmered beneath the surface. By 1976, at the very height of their success, those tensions would erupt into a turning point that changed the group forever. Teddy Pendergrass breaks away. By the mid-1970s, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes were riding the highest wave of their career, and standing at the center of that wave was Teddy Pendergrass. His voice was unmistakable, deep, commanding, and emotionally raw. Audiences didn't just hear Teddy, they felt him. And as his presence grew, so did the tension inside the group. The cracks began to show when Teddy realized how essential he had become. After the breakthrough success of If You Don't Know Me By Now, it was clear to fans and industry insiders alike that Teddy was the face and sound driving the group forward. His importance was formally acknowledged when the group's name was altered to Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes featuring Theodore Pendergrass, beginning with the album To Be True. On paper, it looked like recognition. In reality, it deepened resentment, especially around money. Teddy believed he wasn't being paid what he deserved. While the group's records sold in massive numbers and their concerts filled venues, he felt that Harold Melvin controlled the finances and benefited far more than the rest. Teddy's frustration wasn't just personal, it was shared. One member, Charles Mintz, later summed it up bluntly. If there wasn't no Teddy, there wouldn't have been any Blue Notes. At the same time, Teddy's success lifted others too. Producers Kenneth Gamble and Leon Huff were rising alongside him, crafting songs that perfectly matched Teddy's vocal power. Together, they created a sound that defined Philadelphia soul. Teddy's energy fueled the music, and the music, in turn, fueled the careers of everyone around him. But behind the scenes, bitterness was growing. Teddy felt Harold contributed little to performances while making decisions that hurt the group. Matters came to a head during a disastrous stay at the Playboy Club in Los Angeles. A dispute between Harold and the club's management resulted in the group being forced to pay their own hotel bills and expenses. While the other members struggled to scrape by, Harold was seen enjoying himself, surrounded by wealthy friends. The breaking point came when the band asked Teddy to confront Harold on their behalf. When Teddy entered Harold's room, what he saw enraged him. Harold sitting comfortably with stacks of cash, laughing, while the rest of the group barely had enough money to get through the tour. In that moment, Teddy knew the situation would never change. He walked away. The announcement that Teddy Pendergrass was leaving the group sent shockwaves through the music world. Fans were stunned. The group's momentum faltered almost immediately, and several members soon followed Teddy out the door. Harold Melvin was furious and reportedly threatened Teddy, but Teddy didn't flinch. He believed in his talent, and he was ready to stand on his own. Teddy's decision proved pivotal. His solo career would soon confirm what many already suspected. He didn't need the group to be a star. Years later, Harold Melvin found himself in another battle, this time over the very name that had defined his career. In the late 1980s, rock musician Neil Young released an album titled "This Note's for You" and named his backing band the Blue Notes. Melvin, who owned the rights to the name, took legal action. The court ruled in Melvin's favor, forcing Neil Young to abandon the name and rename his band the 10 Men working for the remainder of the tour. So where are they now? Harold Melvin, the man who built the Blue Notes. When people speak about the foundation of Philadelphia soul, one name is impossible to ignore: Harold Melvin. Often called one of the oldest working men in show business, Melvin was more than a frontman. He was a builder. Born in Philadelphia, he grew into a quiet but determined leader who helped shape the sound of soul music throughout the 1970s. Under his guidance, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes delivered smooth yet powerful songs that spoke directly to the heart. The Blue Notes became a defining act on Philadelphia International Records, the legendary label run by Kenneth Gamble and Leon Huff. Their music wasn't limited to romance. It carried social and political weight, reflecting the struggles, hopes, and realities of Black America at the time. That depth is one of the reasons their songs continue to resonate decades later. Behind the scenes, Harold Melvin had an exceptional eye for talent. He played a key role in helping artists like Billy Paul and Bunny Sigler launch their solo careers. He also paid close attention to performance, creating choreographed dance routines that made Blue Notes shows dynamic and memorable, not just concerts, but full stage experiences. Even after the group's commercial peak faded, Melvin refused to step away. Throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s, he continued performing with different versions of the Blue Notes, navigating shifting record labels, legal battles, and lineup changes. Through it all, he remained deeply loyal to his original collaborators, including Bernard Wilson, Lawrence Brown, Lloyd Parks, and Jerry Cummings, determined to preserve the spirit of the group he had built. Tragedy struck in 1996 when Harold suffered a massive stroke that left him unable to speak or move. The following year, a second stroke ended his life. He was just 57 years old. His passing marked the end of an era for Philadelphia soul, but not the end of his influence. Harold Melvin left behind his wife, Ovelia Melvin, 2 daughters, and 3 sons. He was laid to rest at Ivy Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia. Today, he is remembered not only as a singer and band leader, but as a visionary who helped define a genre. Teddy Pendergrass. My name is Teddy Pendergrass. They call me Teddy Bear. And I'm an Aries. That confidence wasn't an act. It was the foundation of who Teddy Pendergrass was. Long before tragedy reshaped his life, Teddy rose to fame as the powerhouse lead singer of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, captivating audiences with a voice that was raw, commanding, and deeply emotional. His performances didn't just entertain, they dominated rooms. When Teddy chose to leave the group and pursue a solo career, it proved to be a turning point. On his own, he became one of the biggest stars in R&B, releasing hit after hit and building a fan base that adored his masculinity, vulnerability, and unmistakable sound. For a time, he was living the dream: fame, money, sold-out shows, and the future wide open. Then came the night that changed everything. Driving his Rolls-Royce along a winding road, Teddy suddenly lost control when the brakes failed. The car crashed violently into a tree. The injuries were catastrophic. Teddy broke his neck and was left paralyzed from the chest down. What first appeared to be a tragic accident later took a darker turn. Investigators determined that the brakes had been tampered with. The crash was not an accident. Teddy sued Rolls-Royce and won. But the most haunting question, who wanted him harmed, was never answered. The aftermath was brutal. Teddy sank into deep depression, struggling to accept a life without mobility. He feared his career was over, and at his lowest points, he considered ending his life. As if that weren't enough, the music world moved on. Other voices, like Marvin Gaye, whose sexual healing dominated the charts, filled the space Teddy once occupied. He felt forgotten, replaced, and isolated. Loss followed him even before the accident. In April 1977, his manager and girlfriend Tasmia Lang was shot dead outside her home. The murder was never solved, though Philadelphia's Black Mafia was widely suspected, allegedly angered by her control over Teddy's lucrative career. The trauma added another layer to a life already marked by pressure and danger. Over time, Teddy withdrew from the spotlight. He told his story in his autobiography Truly Blessed, published in 1998, laying bare his pain, anger, faith, and survival. His personal life continued to evolve. In 1987, he married dancer Karen Still, who had performed in his shows. They divorced in 2002. Later, he found peace with Joan Williams, whom he married in 2008. Together, they supported community work through the Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church, establishing a youth fund in Teddy's name to help inner-city children in Philadelphia. In 2009, Teddy underwent surgery for colon cancer and initially appeared to be recovering, but complications followed. Respiratory issues sent him back to the hospital, and after 7 months of fighting, Teddy Pendergrass died of respiratory failure on January 13, 2010, at Bryn Mawr Hospital. He was 59 years old. He was laid to rest at West Laurel Hill Cemetery. He left behind 3 children, Tisha, LaDonna, and Theodore Jr. Even in death, his story refused to fade. In 2019, BBC Film released the documentary If You Don't Know Me on Showtime, reintroducing his legacy to a new generation. Plans for a biopic have also circulated, with Tyrese Gibson attached to portray him, and discussions involving producer Lee Daniels continuing. David Ebo. David Ebo was one of those voices that didn't need to shout to be powerful. Born and raised in Philadelphia, he grew up surrounded by music and soul traditions that shaped his sound from an early age. Singing came naturally to him, and by the time opportunity finally arrived, he was ready, even if the circumstances were daunting. That opportunity came when Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes faced an impossible task. After the departure of Teddy Pendergrass, the group needed a new lead singer, someone strong enough to step into shoes many believed could never be filled. David Ebo took that risk. Rather than imitate Teddy, he brought his own smooth, controlled, and deeply soulful style to the group, helping them move forward instead of living in the past. With David as lead vocalist, the Blue Notes recorded 4 albums. His voice carried songs that kept the group relevant during a period of transition, reassuring fans that the Blue Notes still had something meaningful to say. His delivery was warmer and more understated than his predecessors, but it connected just as deeply with listeners who appreciated emotional restraint and musical maturity. The final album he recorded with the group, All Things Happen in Time, felt fitting, reflective, patient, and grounded in experience. In 1982, David made a difficult decision to leave the group. He wasn't chasing conflict or fame, he simply wanted creative independence. After stepping away, he took time to shape his own sound, and in 1985, he released his only solo album, I'd Rather Be By Myself, using the name Ebo. The title alone suggested an artist seeking honesty rather than spotlight. The album's title track proved he could stand on his own. It climbed to number 37 on the charts, modest by industry standards, but powerful confirmation of his talent. Fans responded to the sincerity in his voice and the emotional clarity of the song. Tragically, David Ebo's journey was cut short. He was diagnosed with bone cancer and passed away in 1993 at just 43 years old. His death went largely unnoticed by the mainstream music world, but among soul fans, his loss was deeply felt. Gil Saunders. Gil Saunders' journey into music began quietly, long before bright lights and international stages. Born in Philadelphia, he discovered his love for singing at a young age in church. It was there, surrounded by gospel music, that he learned how to project emotion through his voice and gained the confidence to perform in front of others. Church wasn't just a spiritual space for Saunders, it was his first training ground. As he grew older, his musical tastes expanded. He drew inspiration from powerful vocalists like David Ruffin of The Temptations and Marvin Jr. of The Dells. Their emotionally charged delivery shaped the kind of singer Saunders wanted to become. His family and friends noticed his natural talent early on and encouraged him to pursue music seriously, reinforcing a dream that was already taking root. As a teenager, Saunders formed his first group. What began as a handful of local singers eventually evolved into a band called New Day. They performed around their neighborhood, slowly building experience, confidence, and a modest following. These early performances weren't glamorous, but they were crucial. They prepared Saunders for a moment that would change his life. That moment came when he caught the attention of Harold Melvin. Melvin was immediately struck by Saunders' voice and presence. At the time, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes were in need of a new lead singer following the departure of David Ebo. Melvin saw something special in Saunders and invited him to join the group, a major turning point in his career. Joining the Blue Notes opened doors Saunders had only imagined before. He began touring internationally, performing in countries such as England and sharing stages with renowned artists including Billy Paul and the 3 Degrees. One of his most unforgettable moments came in London, when he was officially introduced on stage as the new lead singer of the Blue Notes. For Saunders, it was a proud confirmation that years of dedication had paid off. By 1984, Saunders was fronting many of the group's performances and helping carry their legacy forward. He remained with the Blue Notes for nearly a decade, appearing on television and continuing to build the group's fan base. In 1986, the band was featured in a PBS television special, bringing their music to an even wider audience and solidifying Saunders' role within the group. After roughly 10 years, Saunders chose to step away and pursue a solo career. He wanted creative freedom and the chance to shape his own musical path. Though his solo journey never reached the commercial heights of his time with the Blue Notes, it reflected his desire for independence and artistic control. Gil Saunders passed away in 2021, but his story did not end there. Fans still remember his powerful voice and the warmth he brought to every performance, a singer who carried soul music forward with dignity and heart. Sharon Page. Sharon Page's rise into soul music history came quietly, but once her voice was heard, it was impossible to ignore. She first captured public attention in 1975 with Hope That We Can Be Together Soon, recorded with Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. The song became a major hit, and listeners immediately noticed the warmth and tenderness in her delivery. That recognition only grew with You Know How to Make Me Feel So Good, Another standout performance that confirmed Sharon as a rare vocal presence. Her voice was soft, smooth, and intimate, distinct from the powerhouse styles around her, yet perfectly complementary. Producers Kenneth Gamble and Leon Huff were among her strongest supporters. They often praised Sharon for having a voice that blended effortlessly with Harold Melvin and Teddy Pendergrass, adding emotional balance to the group's sound. Beyond talent, they valued her professionalism and kindness, qualities that made her a joy to work with in an industry often driven by ego. Sharon's love for music began early. Raised in West Philadelphia, she showed signs of vocal ability as a small child. According to her son, Jordani Jean-Baptiste, her parents recognized her gift when she was just 6 years old and believed she was destined to do something meaningful with it. As she grew older, that promise took shape on larger stages, including performances at the legendary Apollo Theater in New York, a milestone for any soul singer. Her career took a decisive turn when songwriters Gene McFadden and John Whitehead introduced her to Harold Melvin. Melvin, impressed by her voice, brought her directly to Gamble and Huff, opening the door to national success. From there, Sharon toured extensively, singing across the country alongside Harold Melvin and Teddy Pendergrass, becoming an essential part of the Blue Notes' most celebrated era. Despite the spotlight, Sharon never lost sight of what mattered most to her. Music was her calling, but family was her center. Her son later shared that she rarely sang at home. When she wasn't on stage, she focused on being present as a mother. She loved cooking, especially traditional soul food. Beef ribs, macaroni and cheese, crabs, and muffins were among her favorites. Those quiet moments at home mattered to her just as much as applause. In later years, Sharon stepped away from singing after developing diabetes, which gradually affected her health. She stopped performing roughly 11 years before her death. Though her voice faded from the stage, it never faded from memory. Not long after, the Blue Notes family suffered another loss: Lawrence Brown. Lawrence Brown was a talented Philadelphia-born vocalist who joined the Blue Notes as the group was gaining momentum. He remained with them through some of their most turbulent years, including the departure of Teddy Pendergrass in 1976 and the death of Harold Melvin in 1997. Where others came and went, Lawrence stayed, committed to preserving the group's legacy and keeping the music alive. Even after multiple lineup changes, Lawrence continued performing, driven by a genuine love for singing and connection with audiences. His loyalty and consistency made him a steady presence during a time of uncertainty. On April 6, 2008, Lawrence Brown passed away at the age of 63 after suffering from a long-term respiratory condition. His death marked another painful chapter for fans who had grown up with the sound of the Blue Notes. Roosevelt Brody. Another important figure often overlooked in the group's early history was Roosevelt Brody. Brody was not just a background member, he was a respected jazz musician whose trumpet playing carried both power and finesse. His sound was smooth yet commanding, instantly recognizable to those who truly understood jazz. While he never chased mainstream fame, his musical voice left a lasting impression on everyone who heard it. One of the most significant chapters of Roosevelt Brody's career was his work with Blue Note Records, one of the most influential jazz labels in history. Being associated with Blue Note placed him among elite company. During this period, he collaborated with legendary musicians such as Art Blakey, contributing to recordings that pushed jazz forward and helped the genre reach new creative heights. Their work together inspired countless listeners and musicians alike. Although Brody never became a household name, his peers deeply respected him. Fellow musicians admired not only his technical skill, but also his generosity. He took time to mentor younger artists, guiding them and passing on what he had learned. Many musicians who followed credited Roosevelt Brody as a quiet influence, someone who shaped their approach to music without seeking recognition. Sadly, his life ended too soon due to ongoing health problems. His passing was felt strongly within the jazz community, especially among those who had worked closely with him. Though he is gone, his recordings and influence continue to live on, woven into the broader musical legacy connected to Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. That legacy, in fact, has only grown stronger with time. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes left an undeniable mark on music history, creating songs that continue to resonate across generations. Their signature blend of soul, harmony, and social awareness has inspired countless artists to revisit and reinterpret their work. Singers such as David Ruffin, Simply Red, Jimmy Somerville, Sybil, The 3 Degrees, and John Legend have all recorded versions of Blue Note songs, proof of their lasting relevance. One of their most powerful anthems, Wake Up Everybody, remains especially influential. Renowned DJ Danny Rampling has called it his #1 song of all time, citing its message and emotional depth. Even hip-hop artists felt the impact. On his 1993 album Doggy Style, Snoop Dogg referenced the group in the intro to Doggy Dog World, using the Blue Notes as a metaphor for irreplaceable chemistry and success. Their influence extended into sampling culture as well. The song I Miss You was sampled by major artists such as Big Boy and Kanye West, proving that their music never truly faded, it simply evolved. In 2007, their contributions were formally recognized when Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes were inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame.